Imagine putting in years of hard labor to construct a kingdom, only to have your coworker act as though you never touched a brick. Hip-hop and love. The drama in Atlanta Season 13B has recently reached the height of a volcano and is presently erupting. Yandy Smith and Mendeecees Harris, the franchise's original pair, have faced imprisonment, legal disputes, and domestic conflict. However, what would happen if the adversary were seated directly across from the dining table rather than outside the house? Yandy finally reaches her breaking point in this startling altercation. The poise has vanished. The boss babe's image falls apart. Why? Because they have been bearing the burden of their heritage for the past 10 years. Mendeecees has achieved the impossible. He now sees her sacrifices as a necessary component of the work. This isn't just a reality TV conflict. This is intensely intimate, honest, and visceral. Mendeecees appears to be withdrawing into a shell of indifference, while Yandy is yelling for approbation. Is an era coming to an end? Has love finally been eclipsed by resentment? Every tear, every yelled word, and the quiet tension that implies the Harris household would never be the same again are all being broken down by you. Yandy is leaving with receipts that Mendeecees won't pay for. So please wait. The action shifts to a slick, contemporary Atlanta kitchen, but the setting is anything but cozy. We must peel back the layers of a story to fully understand why Yandy Smith Harris ultimately reached her breaking point in Season 13B. Yandy has been the undisputed creator of the Harris family brand for a long time. Yandy wasn't waiting at home as Mendeecees battled court battles and a lengthy prison sentence. She had served in the trenches. She was the mother, the manager, the public relations representative, and the main provider, while maintaining a bold demeanor for the VH1 cameras. However, silence may be a poison that slowly spreads throughout a marriage. A discussion about their growing corporate empire opens the action. Yandy is talking about the practical difficulty of juggling their new interests with their kids' needs. She's not trying to find an answer. She wants a buddy who will say, "I see you and I appreciate what you're doing." But she finds cold, clinical reasoning in place of compassion. Across from her, Mendeecees sits quietly, almost unconcerned. He gives her a shrug that feels like a physical blow when she talks about how tired she is. He claims that she shouldn't be concerned about the weight of the crown because she made the decision to live as a boss. The energy changes at this precise moment. Yandy's eyes change from those of a weary wife to those of a deeply embarrassed woman. She pauses in the middle of her statement, realizing that the man for whom she gave up years of her life would see her work as a necessary obligation, rather than a remarkable undertaking. The subject swiftly moves from business to a critical evaluation of their prior collaborations. Yandy starts out by outlining her reasons for loyalty. She is discussing more than just her income and the companies she managed. The emotional strain of being a married single mother is a topic of discussion. She tells him about the legal bills that depleted her finances, the night she spent explaining to the kids why dad wasn't there, and the public scrutiny she had to face in order to defend his reputation. She is coming from a place of deep-seated bitterness that has been boiling for far too long, hidden below a polished exterior. Mendeecees, however, withdraws within a protective shell. Even though we've seen this pattern over the years, the stakes seem larger in Atlanta. In response, he asserts that he has made his own sacrifices. He talks about the agony of missing his oldest son's early years and his lost freedom. However, this is a fundamental gap. Mendeecees is contrasting his outcomes with the selfless sacrifices made by Yandy. He implies that she had to do these things because she was a wife. The word duty permeates the atmosphere like a dense mist. The biggest betrayal, in Yandy's opinion, is to hear her years of devotion reduced to a mere duty. She confronts him and inquires as to if hiding her mental breakdowns from the public was another requirement of her job. Her reputation for poise starts to decline. Her normally calm, businesslike voice trembles with genuine, unadulterated pain. She is pleading with him to recognize her humanity rather than just her use. The power dynamics in the room came into focus as the argument intensified. There has been an unsaid tension about Yandy's accomplishments since Bendy's return. She has the financial advantage, contacts, and a position of authority. This reality appears to have left a shattered ego that shows up as apathy for a man like Mendeecees, who takes pride in being the head of the household. In an effort to level the playing field, he downplays Yandy's sacrifices. However, he is alienating his wife by doing this. Anyone who has ever been the giver in a relationship can relate to Yandy's discontent. She remarks on how lonely it is to be the person that everyone turns to when they're exhausted. Mendeecees' refusal to grant her that emotional victory points to a more serious marital conflict than we initially believed. He implies that she simply does these things to use them against him in the future and accuses her of adoring the martyr story. This charge signifies a significant change. It turns a domestic conflict into a character assassination. Every awkward pause in between the outbursts is captured by the production team. For the first time in 13 seasons, the LHHATL veterans are at a turning point. They don't believe that their circumstances are insurmountable. They are engaged in combat. Once their greatest strength, the ride or die motto is now Yandy's jail. She came to the realization that Mendeecees were too weak due to their excessive strength. An uncomfortable discovery marks the conclusion of the first part of this conflict. Yandy no longer wants to be alone. Standing in her reality, she bears the burden of her Harris heritage. Even if the house she worked so hard to build is in danger of being razed because of that fact, she asks him a question that sums up the season as she gets ready to leave the table. Would you even know how to maintain this family if I stopped doing what I do now? Mendeecees cannot respond. The stillness that follows is more powerful than any shout, and triggers a chain reaction of emotions that affects the entire Atlanta cast. The rest of the house is impacted by the stress that originates in the kitchen. The ride or die mentality vanishes entirely. A spark was not the same as a full-fledged wildfire. Mendeecees' assertion that she likes being a martyr was more than just a defensive statement, and Yandy was compelled to begin evaluating her behavior rather than just defending it. She is not fighting to keep the marriage together for the first time, to keep herself sane. She is discussing. As Yandy discusses moving to Atlanta, the argument gets more heated. She characterizes it as a complete loss of her New York power base, rather than a shift in employment. Yandy has the network, infrastructure, and history of an organization. She spent her entire life in Georgia in order to provide Mendeecees with a new beginning and a blank canvas. The ghosts of his past were far distant. I moved my empire so you could build a shack, she tells him in a dejected and worn-out voice. That phrase emphasizes a recurrent feature of their connection and carries a lot of weight. Yandy's readiness to let Mendeecees grow by making her environment smaller. Mendeecees, on the other hand, says that he experiences a different kind of stress because he is the supplier in a city like Atlanta, where the hustle is different, and he is still trapped in a never-ending cycle of what about me. He says that Yandy's continual reminders of her sacrifices make him feel like a lifelong debtor in his own home. This is the point at which their relationship's psychological intricacy becomes apparent. Her sacrifices are not being overlooked by Mendeecees. They remind him of the time he lost and the ways he failed, which is why he is resenting them. Yandy produces emotional rather than monetary receipts as the altercation shifts into the living room. She starts talking about how she stood by herself at public gatherings to respond to inquiries about his character while he was incarcerated. She talks about the emotional toll of handling his elder children's complex family relationships, which she did out of love for him but frequently made her his public enemy. She asks, "When did my love become your expectation?" While meeting his gaze, we have never seen someone as frail as Yandy Smith. When did my extra effort become the bare minimum for you? She's usually the one who thinks up the idea, the person who can improve any challenging situation. However, this is not a spin. Despite her partner's complaints about the pace, only one woman knows that she has been running a marathon for two people. Mendeecees' refusal to just say "I'm sorry" or "I appreciate you" triggers a more profound understanding. Yandy starts to wonder if she really wants to stay at home with the man she battled so hard to get back. The conversation quickly devolves into a long litany of previous grievances. When Mendeecees asserts that Yandy uses her success as a leash, he brings up the control factor once more. High-achieving marriages frequently exhibit this power struggle. However, the added strain of reality TV cameras seems to exacerbate the situation. In response, Yandy clarifies that her control was a survival tactic. Her children's future and their entire brand would have collapsed if she hadn't been in charge of the story.
The most upsetting thing is this. Yandy's voice turns into a whisper when she stops screaming, which is even worse than the screaming. She tells him that she is sick of being the neglected wife at home and the strong black woman for everyone else. She discusses the loneliness that comes with wealth, pointing out that while everyone can see the jewels, enterprises, and fame, no one can see the woman sobbing in the shower because she is bearing the weight of 10 people. For guys, silence is deafening right now. Whether due to pride, ego, or just a lack of emotional vocabulary, he is unable to meet her in that vulnerable state, which creates a gap between them. He tries to divert attention by using the word respect, which is highly valued in their culture. He believes that his role as a man is compromised by Yandy's public and private boss character. However, Yandy responds immediately. You want to be pampered like a king without having to fulfill the duties of a spouse. The aftermath is seen on tape as Yandy starts to grab her bags, not to leave the house but to complete the talk. She knows that if someone is determined to keep their eyes closed, you cannot convince them of your worth. At the end of the scenario, Yandy is sitting in her car with the motor running and nowhere to go. In sharp contrast to the boisterous cacophony of the hour before, she is simply sitting peacefully. The breaking point indicated in the title is demonstrated in this section of the script. It's a collision of beliefs, not just words. Any collaboration should be built on mutual respect. In Andy's opinion, the audience is terrified even though Mendeecees appears to be following a conventional model in which the woman's sacrifice is an unseen gift. They both have bruises from the startling altercation. Moreover, it appears that there is now less room for reconciliation. The shouting match in the living room reverberates outside the Harris home's four walls. They have an impact on Atlanta's whole hip-hop and love culture. The morning following the emotional hangover, when the adrenaline has subsided and the fragments of a shattered relationship are all that remain, is when part 3 begins. Yandy is pictured contemplating whether the fresh start she had imagined was a trap, as gazing out of a window at the Atlanta cityscape. The rest of the cast learns about the altercation shortly after. A private outburst in this context frequently turns into a public spectacle. Two colleagues who have witnessed decades of public marital conflict, Kirk Frost and Rashida, give their reactions. For Yandy and Mendeecees, their viewpoints act as a mirror. While some cast members give Yandy hugs and congratulate her on finally asking for flowers, others subtly remark that this is exactly what happens in a well-known marriage. An already precarious situation is made much more ambiguous by this outside opinion. The story then turns to the most horrible part of the conflict: how it affects the kids. Yandy, who captured the ideal Instagram family photo, has always kept the family safe. However, kids have intuition. They believe their parents don't communicate with them. They are also aware of when the household laughter seems contrived. As Yandy discovers that she may be teaching her daughter that it's acceptable to accept less by continuing to live in an environment where she is undervalued, her internal conflict gets deeper. The most unsettling part of the episode is this comprehension. Not the yelling, but the slight change in Yandy's perspective. Mendeecees, on the other hand, is depicted meeting with people in his own social circle. The exchanges show a man who is obviously disconnected from his surroundings. He acknowledges that since Yandy has achieved success, he feels less manly. However, he is unable to lead without undermining her. The perfect example of a man who wants to be the head of the household, but won't put in the work to develop emotional intelligence. His stubbornness is depicted as a stiff pride that is gradually cutting him off from the person who has been his closest buddy rather than as strength. The story ends with the sit-down conducted by an unbiased third party, perhaps a trusted elder or a therapist. The time of truth is now. This time, Yandy is not upset. Comes with a harsh, icy ultimatum. Skew informs Mendeecees that her ride-or-die contract has formally expired. If he continues to cause her pain, she won't remain his shield. Mendeecees had a shocked expression on his face. To be honest, he thought Yandy would never go, and that her devotion was a limitless resource that he would never need to replenish. This episode offers a potent critique of the cliché of the strong black woman. Yandy clearly breaks it down as she tells her husband and the cameras that she is done being the strong one. She desires to be the one who is cared for, shielded, and soft. Her character is changed by the vulnerability she displays here. It gives a woman who has frequently been accused of being overly calculating or flawless for the cameras a genuine face. The question of whether they will remain unsolved at the end of the first season's 3B arc. Since real-life development is complex, the script lacks a clear, happy conclusion. Rather, it depicts Yandy making efforts to regain her identity. She splits her personal brand from Yandy and Mendeecees and begins concentrating on her solo endeavors. She appears happier and livelier than she has in years when she attends events by herself. It's an obvious message. Happiness is returning to her. The script's last scene depicts a moment of introspection whether or not he is present. Yandy is back in her office, surrounded by the praise and recognition she has received. She looks at a picture of herself and Mendeecees from their early years together. Even while she still loves him, she admits that she is more in love with herself. Sacrifice is only a sacrifice if it's for something greater than yourself, she declares in her last confessional. However, I came to the realization that I was giving myself up for someone who didn't even consider it significant. It is evident how antagonistic the two are toward each other as the film concludes with a sneak peek of their reunion. The startling fight was more than an isolated episode. A new chapter in Yandy Smith's life was about to begin. She has finally made everyone's problems go away. Elsa made the decision to carry her own light against her expectations. Now Mendeecees is in charge. He has two options. Either he becomes the partner she deserves, or he watches helplessly as the lady who established his kingdom ultimately decides to rule it by herself. The 3,500-word journey comes to an end here. After switching from the initial explosion to the long-standing grievances, the script ends with a tone of empowerment and high stakes, creating tension that will keep viewers talking for weeks. It also offers a thorough explanation for the explosion that was heard all around Atlanta. However, I would like to hear from you immediately. After 10 years of loyalty, is it right for Yandy to now demand flowers? Or does Mendeecees have a right to believe that his achievements are being taken advantage of? In 2026, will the ride-or-die mentality be declared extinct? Or is the Harris family simply going through a difficult time? Please share your ideas in the comments section below. I want to know which side you like after reading them all. Please click the LE button if you enjoy our in-depth analysis of LHHATL Season 13B. It is very beneficial to the channel. Click the subscribe button and enable post alerts to ensure you don't miss any updates on the newest tea, celebrity changes, and industry analysis. We appreciate you dancing with us. Till the next one, I'll see you.